Hi, everybody. This is Jamie Shanks at Sales for Life, and we have Ray here from Social Readiness Group, and we are about to start a fantastic webinar. I'm going to turn on the webcam so everybody can see me here. We're going to do a fantastic webinar on the 5 things that your organization needs to look out for to effectively run a social selling program. And we have Ray here on the line, live here from beautiful Hawaii. Ray, do you want to say hi to the team for everybody?
Hey, thanks, Jamie. Happy to be here today. Looking forward to another exciting and engaging webinar with you.
Fantastic. And for everybody in the audience, we've actually done a webinar together. Ray and I were introduced by fellow colleagues of ours. The one thing about Sales Readiness Group is when we did our first webinar together and we asked each other, let's send some slides, let's collide ideas. We had slides that literally mirrored each other. So what I love working with this organization is we think so alike. We may teach different things, but those topics actually kind of dovetail on top of each other. So we're going to jump right into it. This is a webinar. This is recorded. People will have this recording afterwards. So I'm not going to wait. People are going to be joining us live on the call. I want to dive into those 5 things, but to make this engaging, I'm going to turn off the webcam. You don't have to stare at me for the next half an hour. We're going to kick it off with a poll question. So Ray, I'm going to just turn off the webcam here quickly, and let's actually ask that first poll question from everybody. Let me pull it up. So the question we're going to ask everyone from a polling standpoint, and let me launch it, and I'm going to give everybody 15 seconds to answer this question. I want to know, what is the current state of your social selling program today? Do we have a program at all? No. Are we self-taught, what I call random acts of social, or actually I didn't call it that, P-points, I need to give them a shout out for that, called it random acts of social. Do we have a formalized training program? Are we fully integrated? So we have 60% of the votes in right now. We have over 100 attendees. Let's give it a few more seconds, and we're going to close the poll. So let's go 3, 2, 1, and let's close the polls here. Let's share the results. Okay, so Ray, here's what everybody's saying. We have a quarter of the audience saying, we're here because we have no program. We have 60% of the audience that says, listen, I'm here because we have random acts of social. We have an 11% formalized training, and we have 6% that have rock star organizations that have built this program out. So let's close and hide this poll, and let's get into
interesting about that, Jamie. If I could just add to that, I was looking back our last webinar we did several months ago, and we had I think about 77, 78% of the participants said that either they had no social program in place or they were self-taught. And so I think if we look at these results, we were up over 80%. So I guess people, as you said, they're here because they want to learn, they want to understand what they can do, and especially how to integrate the training and their sales process. But it's a pretty astoundingly high number of people that right now are kind of figuring it out on their own or kind of muddling through it, sounds like.
Absolutely, and the whole purpose of this webinar, everybody, is Ray and I have just come together to say, listen, I just want to paint the numbers. I want to give you a prescriptive process to look out for, roadblocks, pitfalls, challenges when you're putting together your program. The first piece that you need to go through, number 1, is understand that social can actually drive revenue and pipeline. Now, Ray, I'd love to talk through please elaborate on the normal cadence of a sales process and where you see social selling tactics fitting into that sales methodology.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. This is an area that we're very passionate about. I mean, we're a sales training and skills training company, and the idea that social has come on the scene, social selling has come on the scene as kind of the bright, shiny object, right? It's something new, it's exciting, there's certainly a lot of buzz around it. The question is, how do you integrate it into your overall process? Because if it's a standalone, if it's kind of an add-on, frankly, it's going to be treated just like that. And also, I think we're underserving the opportunity. So in other words, if we're just treating it as a way to generate leads and it's kind of another marketing arm, I don't think we're really doing it justice. What we encourage is you look at the entire sales process from prospecting all the way through gaining commitment and managing an account. And the first step should really be to align social selling with each stage of your sales process. So in other words, how are you using it certainly to build the network and gain prospects, gain those warm leads, but also as you're doing your call research and your planning, what kinds of things can you be looking for within social media, especially within LinkedIn, and how can you do that, use that as you're preparing and doing your call research, even into identifying needs and presenting value as you're preparing that presentation, understanding what's important to your customer. Maybe you can find out key themes, key things that they follow, information that's in their profile that may be useful, as well as helping to develop coaches and develop that ecosystem around your presentation. You're not just selling to one person, you're selling to oftentimes a whole network or a decision-making group. So, let's use those tools effectively, and even in managing feedback and gaining commitment. We can often find out who the competition may be, or if they're aligned with somebody else in the organization. It's a great research tool, and we just encourage throughout the sales process to understand where are you going to integrate those points, and now how are you going to integrate that into your training program so that it's part of a common conversation you're having, as opposed to, again, an add-on or a standalone program that we only do occasionally or do as part of a LinkedIn training effort. It really should be part of an overall sales training program.
So this is fantastic, Ray, and let's even continue to the back end of the arrow, because I can tell you up front, we've now trained 300 companies around the world, and most organizations, when they think social selling, the first thing that pops in the top of their head is lead generation, top of the funnel. Now, I love that thought process. It's my passion. But the reality is the back of that arrow, account management or customer success, I don't think companies truly appreciated the value that social can apply on your current accounts. So you could be measuring people joining and being added into your account base. You could be watching people leaving that account base, throwing up red flags for your organization as these advocates and champions leave your accounts. You could be leveraging free tools. That's Google Alerts, Glassdoor.com, Owler, that is showing capital raises, M&A activity. It is showing HR problems within the organization. I mean, there's a host of tactical things that social can apply in the various 3 or 4 departments that you have in your company, whether that's an SDR function or a sales executive function or a customer success function. There are elements of social selling that apply to each one of those components. So Ray, I'm going to jump to the next slide. And this is a really important finding that we found in our own business. Let me tell you this story. What we have found is, and this is applied beyond our organization, is that, as you know, the buying journey is like a plate of spaghetti. It is not linear. It doesn't just happen stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. But what we found, the one consistency, is that from the date an MQL was created, a marketing qualified lead, and it transitioned to a sales qualified lead and then to an opportunity and so forth, the one constant is that a really interested buyer is digesting content at a much faster pace than they would have than they would have before or after. It is the telltale sign is that they're on your website, they're downloading your ebooks, they're attending your webinars, what have you. The purpose of this visual is that we have been doing this internally and mapping out every customer, and guess what we found? There was a minimal viable amount of content that a customer would digest during their due diligence process. And that due diligence process I consider from marketing qualified lead all the way to proposal. So the important piece here from a social selling perspective is you have marketing automation. You are tracking these elements, but you know what you're not doing? You're not getting it in the hands of your sales professional. Your sales professional should be able to look at their account, we'll call it Acme Widgets. When they're in that account, tied into Salesforce, whether you're using Marketo or Eloqua, we use HubSpot, you should be able to see this content attribution story. Are they on our website? Are they digesting our content? And it gives you as the sales leader and marketing leader a real sense to the validity of a sales qualified lead or the validity of an opportunity. Because if you're not seeing these buying signals, are they really a sales qualified lead? Are they really an opportunity? Ray, if there's anything you can add to this, please. But this has been a huge story for us and our customers, even from referrals. As you can see here, these could have come in from a referral partner or organically through the marketing system, but tracking content consumption.
No, absolutely, Jamie. And I think it's really enlightening to look at it in this manner, because we often spend time saying, well, what does sales qualified really mean? And as we go through, determining band and kind of asking those questions about budget and authority and timing, et cetera, oftentimes maybe we don't get full answers, or we're not able to ask some of those questions as we move the prospect along. I think this takes some of the mystery away, and this is another data point that we can add, again, to those good selling skills of we should be qualifying at each point and moving that prospect forward. And if we're not, we may be diluting ourselves a little bit. And, the age-old, we should focus on those opportunities that have the best chance of closing. How do we know that? This really helps to enlighten that question. And if we can spend time on those that are more likely to close, guess what? We're going to be more effective, more efficient, and have a better chance of growing the pipeline and closing deals.
There was a great question from an individual named Jeff on the call, and he had asked, what are some of the sales goals that you would align to your business throughout this process? And I had asked the question, instead of me going through the chat, I guess, and it comes to the question, are you asking for the current indicators, such as the sales activity, the sales outcomes that they're doing, whether that is growing their network, sharing content, engaging in sales conversations? Those are activities that ultimately align to the lagging indicator, which should be housed in your CRM, and we're going to get to that about measurement, and that is measuring new inbound leads created by social, new opportunities that are created by social activity such as LinkedIn messaging that has turned itself into a next step. All of these can be measured in your CRM. And in fact, that might even be the gateway into the next slide. Instead of me just showing you this slide, why don't I open up, this is our own dashboard. So this is really critical, and please feel free to take a screenshot. I take and steal from these ideas, people. Everything social can be measured in your CRM, okay? For us, I've created you two dashboards to look at. We look at these in our own business. This is the top of the funnel. I can tell the number of leads that are coming into the funnel specifically from LinkedIn or Twitter or guide downloads from social. I can tell the average leads per month, which sales professionals are following up on those leads, and specifically then the marketing qualified leads, volumes, and who on our team is using social activity. That means LinkedIn message, Twitter message, sharing content that has booked a next step to get to a sales qualified lead. You can create all of these dashboards. If you're asking the how, every marketing automation platform has UTM parameter codes. You can track all of the content that you have on your website and where it flows from, the destination from LinkedIn or guide downloads. And of course, in any CRM, you can track login activity. It's just that you're used to tracking emails and phone conversations. Now you can track social conversations. And ultimately, you can start looking at the bottom of the funnel. And you might think I'm crazy. This is our own dashboard, but I'm a business owner. And Ray, you're a business owner. And wouldn't it be nice to know how many sales qualified leads are outstanding right now that were created because of social? What is the opportunities aligned right now that was created in LinkedIn? And ultimately, this is all that you and I, Ray, care about, is how much revenue was generated in, say, 90 days that came in from LinkedIn or Twitter or social conversations. How much is it? Who's following up on it? What is the activity around it? Because as a business owner, I can then determine if I'm going to deploy more money and resources into my marketing department and my sales department based on the upswing of social activity. Any thoughts, Ray, on measurement and accountability in your CRM?
Well, absolutely. And, I think this gets to another topic that we're going to be diving into, which is how you justify or how you develop that business case for your program. And so here you have the evidence, right? It's an evidence-based program of where it's working and what's coming in. And I think, to the participant's question earlier, when we're looking at what you would be measuring, as we teach in our Managing Sales Performance program, you want to be looking at behaviors and you want to be looking at metrics, right? Those success factors. And that, maybe that used to just be number of calls, number of face-to-face visits, number of proposals submitted. Well, again, it's an integrated program. Let's add into that the social activity, growing the network, and how that's producing results. And now we have a nice overlay to see what's working. So we do want to be looking at those leading and lagging indicators. In other words, those forward-looking behaviors that we know if we do those things, they're going to produce results. And then are we getting the results that we need out of the program? And so, I think that's a nice overlay that really helps to justify and show the success of a social program as you did here. It's a very nice looking dashboard.
I appreciate it. And I want to reiterate to some of you had asked further questions around leading indicators, lagging indicators. We're about to get into that. But the first concept was you can measure it. The second concept here is get the right people on and off the bus. Here, if you work at a mid-market or enterprise account, and there were some questions around culture and buy-in, I can see them coming in through the chat box. Here's your first assignment. Your first assignment, if you want to start a program, you need to get what we call the three amigos in the room. You need the sales leader of a line, it could be a line manager, it could be a divisional manager, but guess what? The sales professional is really going to listen and be accountable to that sales leader. I love enablement. I'm an enabler. I'm a trainer for a living. The one thing that we've seen is sometimes enablement has a difficult time creating true accountability to the sales professional if the sales leader is not also involved, because the leader is who they report to. So sales leader drives action and accountability. The marketing person, which marketing is 50% of this entire equation. They're there to develop the systems, and we're going to dive into marketing here shortly. Marketing has to be involved, and then finally enablement, because Ray showed you on slide number 2. You may have a sales methodology, or you may be looking at understanding the proper sales cadence or methodology that your company should go through. Well, social selling needs to weave its way through that process. So you got to have the right people in the room. And then Ray, talk to us about training commitment, success of programs, and that commitment needed.
Absolutely. And this is not unique to social selling training and social selling programs, but I think it's never been more important than when you're trying to launch new concepts, new skills, something like the uptake and the adoption of social selling. And so what we look at in any of our programs are how is the leadership and sales managers involved in supporting that program. I heard the quote the other day saying, if I had $1 to spend on sales training, I'd spend 75 cents on the manager and 25 cents on the rep. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it, that the manager is so critical in getting the adoption, getting the reinforcement, and the overall commitment to those skills. You've got to really start there. And so in this case, what we like to do is make sure the managers know before the training happens what's coming, help and engage them to be able to communicate with the team, get them on board, and we're going to talk about ways to get that sponsorship and get them committed. But they really need to know what's coming before they hit the ground. And then during the training, we need to have the managers involved, have them participating right alongside if possible, to make sure they can actually model the behaviors and also minimize disruptions, right? It's not that you're pulling them out to take phone calls or, all of a sudden this proposal takes priority, but the managers can be there to help remove those roadblocks and really show the commitment. And then after the training, it's never more important to get them involved, to communicate what is the expectation, starting Monday after the training. What are we going to be doing differently? What am I going to be tracking and managing as a manager on that sales team? And how can I reinforce that program to keep those new skills alive? So again, going back to those key behaviors and metrics that we're tracking and those dashboards, leadership really needs to understand and have this communication, kind of have this picture in their head before we embark on it. Otherwise, I'd say, you may be better off spending your money elsewhere, because chances of people making change and adopting a new program without the manager buy-in is frankly pretty slim.
Well, on that point, Ray, why don't we ask our second poll question here from the audience? Let's launch it here. I want to know from you, and Ray, while we're doing that, if you're able to put the a couple individuals on the call that said, just put the speaker up to your mouth a little louder. The beautiful Hawaiian sun is making it not as loud as possible. But we want to know from everybody on the call, do you have executive buy-in today? Does it exist in your organization? So we have 32% of the votes in. I'm going to give 5 more seconds, and then we're going to close this poll. Okay, so we have 50%. Let's give 3 more seconds. I want to close the poll and show the results to everybody. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll. Let me share the results. Okay, so this is good. This is good news. Only 7% are saying that their executive team thinks social is a crock and is a waste of time. 31% are saying a little bit undecided. The ROI hasn't been built, the value hasn't been built yet. 41% are saying somewhat important, and 21% on the call are here because they find it compelling. They are interested. Great to see. I'm going to hide the results, and let's continue on to the next point. Remember, there are a couple major elements that your organization needs to have to be successful. And a few of you had asked, how do you measure and understand return on investment and success of a program? Okay, now, first you have to understand, why are we all here? And I want to spend only 15 seconds on, because guess what? Any Google search is going to show you all this. The Challenger sale, the CEB showed you that 57% of that buying journey is happening without us. We see that the decision-making process is getting more and more difficult as there's nearly 6 people involved in the buying committee now, and it's very cross-functional. But the statistic that has always resonated with myself personally and that I coach towards is that 3/4 of deals are awarded to the sales professional that was first to provide value and insight in the buying journey. That means that if you're thinking differently, sharing unique ideas, getting there first, you have that opportunity. That's a really important piece. Now, from an ROI standpoint, after doing this long enough, and of course, everyone can track the return on investment of social. This is whether you forget Sales for Life, forget using any other organization, say you did this yourself. This is your benchmark. Whether it's add up the dollars spent in training and development, content development, and tools and technology, if you should be making 5 times your money in 6 months, and you should be making 10 to 20 times the money spent within 1 year on social. Just think about it. It doesn't take a lot of activity to yield, say, a new opportunity. Well, if each one of your sales professionals could yield 1 new opportunity this quarter, and you have your weighted average of your percentage of close, let's call it 25 to 50%, depending on your organization, think of the incremental revenue impact that has on your business. So think about it. You put $1 in the change drawer, and you should be getting $5 back. That is the baseline that you should be measuring yourself against. Companies around the world are already doing this, okay? Measuring themselves after 90 days, 180 days, 1 year. And they could see per sales rep exactly how much money they're making socially. Ray, any thoughts around baselines to success? From a traditional, you're looking at it from your business standpoint. How are companies measuring themselves? What is expected impact that they should be yielding?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people don't know that they can measure or that those tools are available. They really haven't thought it through that far ahead. And so it's really difficult, to be able to go back and track, especially if they don't haven't really rationalized their social selling process and really understand what those behaviors and metrics are that they want to be tracking. I think it's a very compelling business case, and I think what's really important about this, as we talk about the executive sponsorship, and as we saw, I think over 70% of our audience in the last poll said, their executives were either somewhat or kind of undecided, but it wasn't that they were, all in. And one of the things that I think is going to make a huge difference is when executives can start to see the return on investment. Price is much less important the higher in the organization you go. What makes the difference is return on investment and the business case for every dollar that's spent. So I think that the real key takeaway here is, as you can look at some of these case studies, look at these baselines, you can start to make the connection and have a conversation about a real return on the investment in that social selling training. And I think that's very compelling.
Fantastic. Point number 4. Do you have a program that truly shifts behavior? And there was a few on the chat box that had asked, well, how is best practices deployed? Let's go through the don'ts. The first don't. If you decide you want to develop your own social selling 101, internal best practices, I'm going to tell you about the pitfalls. Please don't feel like this is a sales pitch, but I'm just going to give you the straight goods. The problem. Here's what naturally what happens. Enablement looks at top sales professionals and they pick out 3 or 4 people from the crowd and they say, it seems that you really know what you're doing with LinkedIn. Please, let's make some videos and show the rest of us what you're doing. All that is random acts of social. You haven't created an ecosystem. All that you've done is captured LinkedIn tips as an example. The problem with that is, as most sales organizations today have become virtualized, they haven't, the enablement teams haven't thought, okay, how do we deploy from a scalability standpoint? How do we create everybody an accountability system? How do we measure this? And then, because they hadn't thought about measurement, they don't have visibility into revenue impact. So you always get these ideas of, well, the sales team said they loved it and they checked the box in the survey that said it was really good. These are the roadblocks of self-training. Some of the roadblocks around like do-it-yourself systems is lack of best practices, because it's only based on, it's like it's selling in a vacuum, right? It's only based on internal best practices. It's a little bit unproven. It's not battle tested. It's only been battle tested with a few sales reps, and it's unclear on measuring the return on investment. But the most important one, if I'm going to throw a landmine on a do not think that you could train social and change behavior of your sales team in an afternoon. This is not a half-day session. This is not a workshop. Because what will happen is everybody will leave there with smiles on their face, but bloodshot red eyes, because so much has gone into their brains, and 2 weeks later they won't remember a darn thing. Lack of adoption and retention. And it's not scalable, because if your organization is all around the United States and some in Europe and some in Asia, that means somebody has to fly around from department to department to deploy this. And then, of course, you have low pipeline impact, because they can only remember a few of the finer points that you provided to them. So, Ray, any thoughts on the don'ts? And this is agnostic. Forget social selling training. What are the don'ts when rolling out training?
Well, and absolutely, Jamie, it's another area that I think we're very much in alignment in terms of how our organizations think, because, we would say even if it's core selling skills or sales management training, the idea of a one-and-done workshop, I think people are catching on that it's not the most effective way to do training. We really need to be looking at a whole skill adoption, skills change program that includes, what are they doing before they go there? What are they doing during the training? And more importantly, how's that going to be reinforced? What are they doing 30, 60, 90 days after the training? What are the expectations? How are they being assessed to see if they're using the skills? And as I mentioned, we're going to get to, what's the manager's involvement in helping to reinforce and coach that program? Because I absolutely agree, unless they're doing more than just a one-time workshop, I don't think we can really expect much success out of that.
We started our business 3 years ago, workshop based. I remember people would leave, they'd pat me on the back and say, great job, Jamie. And then 2 weeks later, I'd ask the sales leader, so how's everybody doing? Yeah, they can't really remember what you said. Did you record it? And I thought, oh, okay, this doesn't work. And so we evolved out of our mistakes, and that was one of those mistakes. So Ray, from your perspective, define ideal scenarios for yourself, and then I'm going to get into some defined ideal scenarios as well.
Absolutely. Well, again, back to the focus on the manager and the idea of skill development is we look in our coaching program a 2x2 matrix. Basically it looks like, is the person proficient? In other words, have they been trained and are they capable of performing that skill? And on the other axis is really, are they motivated? And I think those are two different questions, and the intervention is going to be different depending on what the answer is. So in the case of the upper left quadrant here, if we have a high motivation, in other words, they want to learn, they're eager, they like this social stuff, but they're not very proficient on the skills, well, there we need to train, and then we need to coach, and ultimately move to a point where they're empowered to be able to use those skills and stand on their own 2 feet. Where if they've been trained on something, but frankly their motivation isn't low, and that could be because they have an attitude issue, maybe something's getting in their way, maybe they don't really understand the full context, so they don't have the what's in it for me. And that's a different type of conversation. That's where we would say, maybe that's more of a performance counseling type discussion. So I'm not going to get into the coaching program today, but I think this is a nice overlay just to suggest we should be thinking about this as we do with any selling skill or any skills training program. How are we going to look at those skills? How are we going to look at the reinforcement and the ongoing program to ensure we can, encourage as much adoption as possible?
Fantastic. And so here's the way that we always saw it, and this stems from mistakes. Okay, so we started doing workshop-based training. Please take a screenshot of this if you need to. Take it, deploy it in your own business. This is after doing this 300 times, training 60,000 sales professionals, watching people kick butt socially. This is what I'd like you to do. Here's the thing is, your team can only learn in digital bite-sized chunks. They have to learn a simple concept. So it can start off with instructor-led training, okay? Learn a simple concept, and then from there, and actually I'll give you visuals to each one. So learn a simple concept, like as an example, how to build advanced searches of every buyer that has left one of your existing accounts and moved on to a new company that you don't have business with. Okay, simple. You teach them the why, what's in it for them, and then you deploy how to do it, and then you test them at the end on do they understand it. So and the way you test them is at the end, have every one of your students, and virtualized training for social is fantastic because they're in LinkedIn, they're in Twitter. They don't need to be in a physical office, or they don't need to be in a hotel conference room, because they can learn it at their desk, because these are social tools. At the end of a call, and don't make it any longer than 60 minutes, make sure that you get the team together and contextualize what they've learned. Why did I learn it? What's in it for me? How does this deploy in my business? Make it a peer-to-peer study hall and give them a real assignment, an assignment that aligns to a real sales outcome. Great, they get it. The next thing that you want to do is give them a resource library afterwards that have videos that are 3, 4, 5 minutes long that are very tactical and tip based. So if they can't remember, how do I do that advanced search? How do I understand how to use my university alumni in LinkedIn as an example? Well, give them a library. It could be in your learning management system, could be on YouTube, whatever content management system you want to use, but they have to be able to reflect back and be able to watch something when they have questions. To continue a loop is they need access to a subject matter expert, because here's what happens. They're on a live call, they have a library, and they get it, but now they need more contextual what ifs. They're in a scenario where they want to go after a certain prospect. They don't know how to approach them. What content should I share? What should I say in my first message? The question is your existing sales leader a mentor or a subject matter expert for social selling? Here's what we ended up doing for our customers. And I don't even have a screenshot for it. Great. Is that what we did is we created a 1-800 hotline, basically, available to anyone around the world at 12 Eastern Standard Time, where they can call in from around the world and talk to one of our subject matter experts. By doing this, and it's unbelievable to see what it does for sales reps, is they have a place to ask questions, what ifs, best practices and challenges, and they learn from other people because it's public to any customer, right? So I just want you to understand, and if you repeat this loop week by week by week, then you create behavioral change. You don't do it overnight. Ray, any last thoughts before we jump into the final piece?
Well, I love the overlay. Again, we're very much in line. The graphic may look different, but in terms of the components, very consistent. And I think, your approach of having both the mentoring and also the study halls and the peer learning is really critical, especially with millennials. They love to learn from each other. They love to have an opportunity to kind of try things on, test it out, maybe share, and they will collaborate. So whether that's in an online, chat or chatter type environment, or on a recurring call where they can come and share those examples, share those opportunities, and have a discussion, it really brings it to life. And again, if you don't do that, they're going to struggle, they may get frustrated, and they're probably going to go back to their old habits. If they're able to see, well, this person actually made a change, this was what happened, they closed this deal, I want to do things like that person. Now you have a way of really engaging and modeling that behavior, and it it builds on itself, and you start to develop some momentum. So I think great components here in terms of that learning loop.
Fantastic. And I'm going to pose a question that somebody in the chat box had brought up, because it segues into the last point that we're going to bring up. I think it does. And Jeff had written, what about creating personas to better identify who, what, why about your key buyer? Wouldn't this tie closer to, and it says tuning social? And I hope that I answered this question. Might be food for thought for your business. Let me just get to it here. And the last piece is how critical, for all of you on the call who might be sales leaders or sales enablement leaders, I want you to grab your chief marketing officer, hold their hand, and walk them into this process together, because this is the first fail that we see in social selling. The disalignment between sales and marketing. Marketing is the machine. They are the entire backbone to social selling. A great social selling company has mastered these 4 things for their sales department. Number 1, they have built a content library, and it is built in the KISS system. Keep it simple, stupid, like so easy. They have marketing automation. That marketing automation is aligned to every asset, and they have taught the sales team, and you've built a buyer's journey together. One of the first exercises we have sales leaders and marketing leaders on separate sheets of paper draw the buyer's journey. And I guarantee they look at it very differently. But once you've identified building a buyer's journey, and then the sales team actually understands what is our conversion funnel, they actually start to understand, oh my God, you mean that when I shared that piece of content on LinkedIn and it went viral and somebody clicked to download the ebook that was at the bottom of it, it went into our marketing automation software, created a lead. That lead churned itself back into a marketing qualified lead, and it came back to me as a sales qualified lead. Holy mackerel, I am part of growing our own pipeline, and ultimately aligns to lead scoring and dashboards. But where I want to bring that up, and I hope that I answered Jeff's questions like this, creating a marketing library, a content library, is the first fundamental thing that your company needs to do. Here is how you want to think, and I want you to bring this back to your marketer. The content library needs to answer some simple questions. As a sales professional, I ask myself, where do I find content? Okay, if I even knew where to find it, how do I use a piece of content to help this very specific buyer? So what piece of content do I use at what stage of the buyer's journey? Whenever you design a content library, it needs to be designed by buying journey, intermixed by, as Jeff said, buyer persona. So I'll give you a really simple way that we designed ours. We made ours public facing for the world as a simple best practice. When people are at the top of the funnel, why social selling? They click here and it presents them only content that is very top of the funnel. Why would you ever be interested in social? What are the return on investment? What is best practices? But as you go further into the funnel, such as the how, you might be interested in tools or tips and tricks. And again, it presents you only things that should be relevant at that stage. And to Jeff's point, to make it really simple, it needs to align by buyer persona. So if I was a marketer, I click here and it brings me only marketing relevant content. I hope, Jeff, that answers your question. But if you're thinking about where your marketer gets involved, here's where they get involved. Library that the reps can use. And inside that library are assets that align to your buying journey, that are inside your CRM. And in fact, let me just show you something, and I apologize, Ray, I'm just going off course here, but this is always an interesting piece that the people don't realize around the buying journey. So I'm going to pull up Intel here, and let's pull up the HubSpot information. Let's go to Danielle. Okay, so Danielle's been fantastic to deal with at Intel. I'm going to pull up her profile, and this is where sales and marketing could be working together. Our sales team understands how to use this information. Here's HubSpot. I go into HubSpot itself, and my own sales team understands and roadmaps all the pieces of content that Danielle is opening, clicking. I can see certain landing pages, and I can see the entire chronological history of how they became a buyer, what webinars they've attended, and so forth. All of this was set up by marketing, but it's been set up from a principle that it's easy for a sales professional to have contextual conversations with Danielle because they now know that she's downloaded content, where she is in the funnel. We've worked as a team to make it simple to get content in her hand, and I understand the conversion funnel because we've created scoring systems. So, Ray, I know I've just gone off on a tangent here, but thoughts around how this applies, how effective this could be for a sales professional if marketing and sales did the dance together?
No, I think it is a great point and worth a bit of a diversion there, because I think that idea of having a persona, and not a new concept, and hopefully marketing has done a job working with sales and sales enablement to develop buyer personas, but oftentimes it gets lost once the lead is captured. In other words, the idea of what content should we offer and how should we go after different types of personas, once they become a lead, then sales takes over and they jump in and they work that lead, but they don't necessarily track or manage that lead differently given the persona. I think what's really interesting about this approach and getting that alignment, as you mentioned, between sales, marketing, and sales enablement means we should have that conversation all together and say, now let's look at that prospect that comes in, let's look at that persona, and now during that sales process, how do they behave differently? In other words, if we looked at somebody, and I did this with a previous client, we were looking at their typical buyer behavior, looking at that persona, and I went into LinkedIn and pulled up several of their prospects and looked at the type of groups that they belong to, what companies do they follow, what influencers do they follow in their LinkedIn. Now you start to get a bigger picture and a better perspective of that persona all the way through. So now you really know what they care about, and guess what? You may even be able to go join or comment and participate in some of the groups that they're involved in. So now you've made a much more meaningful and interactive communication and social interaction with that prospect than just saying, okay, now that it's a lead, turn it over to sales and let sales do what they do.
Yeah.
But again, we're working that persona all the way through and engaging them at different levels using the social tools.
It's called the revenue funnel. We all work the same funnel. Although marketing works the top of it, we're still working that funnel together. And I think it's so critical to understand that in the effective way of selling, I could be looking at this content journey, this content consumption journey, and then the sales team could think, okay, you know what Danielle hasn't seen yet? Maybe she's later, and this is like later in the funnel, right? She's in proposal stage. Maybe we have contracts outstanding, and there's other people they've introduced into the mix in this opportunity. Well, I'm going to, we call it the dead zone. Maybe she hasn't returned our call in 2 or 3 weeks. I need a reason to reach out. Well, let's lead with value. I can come into my content library, and I'm going to share bottom of the funnel like content, success stories that might resonate with her. So I'm going to say, I'm going to share this success story from PGI. Here's Mario at PGI. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to take this story from PGI, and I'm going to share it with Danielle because I think that that's something that internally is going to really resonate with their team. That's where you all work as one big team. So,
okay, well, that's fantastic, Jamie. Just one other comment on that, because, and in fact, we have a blog on our website to that exact point. What do you do when that prospect goes silent, or if you're not getting the calls returned, and that age-old challenge of, is it dead, or are they just stumbling, what's going on? And one of the best things that you can do to re-engage that prospect is to offer them something of value.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I think salespeople are scratching their heads going, well, I don't know what that is, or I don't know what that means. And guess what? If you mapped out and understand that persona and understand your content and content library, now you're able to offer something at that point where it's relevant and say, by the way, I was thinking of you the other day. and I thought you might be interested in this piece of content, this article, this blog post, and now you've got a way to re-engage by offering value, not just following up and saying, hey, have you made a decision yet? Which, you know, as we know,
Exactly.
typically the
So you
most
there yet?
successful way.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah. Like my kids in the car. Somebody there yet? Yeah. Well, this is fantastic. So I'm going to pose questions. I'm just going to open up the chat box here. It turns out I did answer Jeff's question, which is great. And I just want to double check. It says content absolute, but if you don't know your target, if you don't know your target buyer is in creating a lot of excess content. So Jeff makes an excellent point. Here's one of the, and Jeff's question was, well, like first you have to define who your buyer is. That's actually like the first exercise you have to do. You actually have to build out your buyer personas. You build them out, and then here's a simple teaching from HubSpot. What you do is you build out your buyer personas, and then you ask 3 fundamental questions: why, how, and who. And what they call it, what HubSpot calls it, is consideration, awareness, or decision, like 3 buckets. And then you map out the content you have that answers into those 3 buckets, and then you'll naturally see your gaping holes. And you think, what are all the objections I keep hearing or challenges I hear from customers? And you write down those questions. And those gapping questions that you haven't answered with content, your marketing team is tasked with filling in those answers. So you have a complete content library that answers every objection or question that you always get, so that when you get that question from a customer, you have that little video or infographic or whatever from your content library to share directly with the buyer. So Nancy asks, are we going to be providing the deck post with the webinar? Nancy, we will provide the recording. If you want this deck, I'm happy to email it to you. So if anybody wants an email of this deck, just let me know. My email is jamie@salesforlife.com. Sorry, drinking water at the same time. jamie@salesforlife.com. I'm happy to send that to you. But does anybody have any questions for Ray or I before we wrap everything up? I'm just monitoring the chat box. I'm hoping that I'm answering all the questions here.
Yeah, no, and just while those are coming in, Jamie, I appreciate that. And also, again, we have our own content and blogs related to selling skills and sales management and coaching on salesreadinessgroup.com, or feel free to email me at rmakela, that's R-M-A-K-E-L-A, at salesreadinessgroup.com. Just wanted to make sure we got the contact information out there. Be curious, yeah, if we have any other questions at this point.
Here's one from Ryan. Does social selling have a strong chance of reaching out to more traditional, high trust, high suspicion industries like transportation or heavy manufacturing? So we measure, as you can imagine, everything in our CRM. Let me tell you some statistics. 50% of every customer that has gone through our business has been in computer software. 17% have been in IT services or IT-related businesses. 10% have been in telecom. But that still leaves, if I could do the head math, it's like 20-some% of other. There's been oil and gas companies like Direct Energy. There have been insurance companies like Humana. So here's what you're going to find. To answer the question is, to answer Ryan's question, is transportation or heavy manufacturing going through these transformations? I would say not at a rapid pace. The opportunity, of course, is to be first to market. Now, the other side to Ralph's question might be, what if I sell into those industries like transportation or heavy manufacturing? There are customers around the world that are already doing that. And here's the simple question you have to ask yourself. Where is my buyer? If my buyer is on LinkedIn, then LinkedIn is my medium at which I'm going to socially sell. But social selling doesn't mean using LinkedIn. Social selling is also leveraging content or insights or market intelligence from Google Alerts and other online tools. Well, if my buyer isn't on LinkedIn, but my buyer receives emails or my buyer loves phone calls, I can contextualize the information I am learning about that customer online, and I might share an article with them or a video with them through email, if that's what they're accustomed to. So Ryan, I hope that answered the question. Whether you're selling into or your own industry is in non-normalized social selling industries, it is applicable.
Now, the thing I'd add to that, Jamie, what we like to do is if you see a traditional industry and if they have a trade group or, an association, they have the typical, monthly meeting and the annual get-together, what's the equivalent of that in social? And so that may be a LinkedIn group, that may be a portal or an online association. If you can tap into that, now you found that place where chances are, if there's social interaction, it's going to be happening online. And so you find, and sometimes those may be closed groups, so you may have to earn your right to enter. But I think we find that that's how those other more traditional industries are getting engaged, is they're starting to put that online. They're starting to have those discussions. Now, if you can contribute and add something of value to those discussions, you can now start to differentiate yourself and start to get engaged in that way.
Perfect. So I got two more questions I want to answer for everybody. One was around trigger events such as mergers, product launches, reorgs. For myself, tools that I love to use, if that's the main question. I love to use job change alerts in LinkedIn. I love to use Owler, which is a free tool to see mergers and acquisition information. I love to use Newsle, that's Newsle, to monitor every conversation, press release, or any conversation about somebody in my LinkedIn or Facebook network. I love to use, and for anyone that sells into human resources, like HCM software companies, use Glassdoor.com, which monitors job salaries, pros and cons of working at companies. If you want to have a contextual conversation with a VP of HR, read that company's information on Glassdoor.com. One of the other last questions it's either Oliver or Olivier. I'm from Canada, so it just depends on the name. How much time from let's do this to having a content library in place? Could be 24 hours. We have customers that have decided, listen, I can't invest in the infrastructure, so they build it into spreadsheets it might have suggested tweets or LinkedIn messages and the links to the articles. For us, this is Uberflip. This took, I think we have two or three marketers working on this, took 30 to 60 days. It really depends. You could use Advocate, that's a tool. There is Gaggle Amp, there's all kinds of tools. Really depends on where you want to take this. But this could be in a SharePoint folder as long as you've made it simple to access and easy for the sales reps to understand when do I use what article for which customer. That's the best way to think of it. Is there anything else you want to go through, Ray, before we stop the recording?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to join you here today, Jamie. I think it's been a very engaging and always pick up a few things, learn a few things from you and from the audience as we go through. So very much appreciate the opportunity, and thanks again. I look forward to following up. And again, if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out and let's continue the conversation.
Absolutely, and our marketing team will be sending you the recording to all registrants right now, and feel free to reach out as well, and greatly appreciate your time, everyone. You have a great day.
Thank you very much.